session?
Well, you've had time with in chapel and prayer, but as we open up the Word, I'd like to also ask the Lord to help us understand His Word. So let's pray together. Father, thank you for this new day, and we know that with each day we have new opportunities. And we thank you that when we walk with you, Lord, that no day is ordinary, that you bring people into our lives one way or another. You give us opportunities to show our faithfulness. And just as we live in these day-type compartments, as Jesus exhorted us to, I pray, Father, that we'll buy up every opportunity. And for us right now, as we refocus back on your word in the book of Revelation, I pray that it would be really an outstanding time, because we learn and because the Spirit finds access to our minds and also to our hearts. And so, Lord, we do commit the morning to you. We pray that it would be good, because we are being taught by you, Lord. So give us understanding. We know there's some things that are difficult for us to understand. It may take some time to put them all together. But we do thank you, Father, for the Spirit who illuminates the Word. And I pray, Father, that we will be living without being contaminated by sin, which always hurts that process. And so pray that you'd cleanse us, and I pray that our lives would be honoring to you, that we would in fact be vessels of honor. So as we pray that you give us the ability now to give our attention to your word and to focus back on it, and we will give you thanks, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. I'd like to have you just fold everything up for just a second, because I'd like for us to do a little bit of review and see what we can do without looking at notes or so on, and which gives us a better idea of what we're remembering rather than looking at our notes. Okay, Jesse, I'll let you begin, because I know that last time I almost left you out, and I remember how your feelings were hurt, and so I'll want you to answer the first question. The seventh trumpet is known by two other names, and what would those be?
The third woe is one.
Okay, the third woe, right.
The bowl judgments.
Exactly, and the bowl judgments. So the third woe, the bowl judgments, and the seventh trumpet are all saying the same thing. Lena, number 2 is yours. When John gets that scroll and opens it up, what are the 4 subjects? We've looked at 2 of them, but what are the 4?
One of them's the witnesses.
Okay, the 2 witnesses.
I know, but it's not coming to mind. So
There's the scroll that's opened up, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 things.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Anyone want to help her out?
Israel being persecuted.
Okay, Israel, the woman being persecuted by the dragon,
The Antichrist.
the Antichrist, which we'll start with this morning, and Armageddon. Okay, so for whatever reasons, the Lord felt that those needed to be expanded and clarified, and so we had a timeout in the progress of Revelation in which those 4 elements are now developed. Okay, Abby, what's this answer? Minimum number of people die in the seal judgments.
Well, the seventh seal is also part of the trump. The trumpets are part of the seventh seal. So are you just wanting the seals
No,
that were given to us?
just the seals, just the actual judgments, rather than forget the seventh seal.
Well, 25% of the population dies.
Okay, 25%, which is a staggering sum, for sure. Okay, Janet, let's try number 4, okay? At which judgment do the people of the world finally realize this is God's judgment, it's the wrath of the Lamb, it's not just a really, really bad set of circumstances. Okay, it's about, we think it's probably about halfway. What specific judgment is it that does it? The what?
Well, the fifth judgment.
Okay,
Or the fifth trumpet, sorry,
well,
in that area.
okay. Julie?
The fifth seal.
It's the seal, but it's not the fifth one.
It's the 6.
It's the sixth one, and that's when they have this cosmic disturbances, sun becoming black, moon becoming like blood, the earthquakes which move all islands and mountains out of the place. I mean, the world's rocking and roll at this point in time.
Wait, so the fourth seal details what then? What do they realize after the fourth seal?
Well, we don't know because we aren't told, but the implications are that they just are seeing this as just like, wow, man, this is really bad. You know, it's just
Even
the
after
perfect
third-
storm, you know? But they're not seeing it as the finger of God until the sixth seal. Okay? Okay, Liz, let's try you on number 5, okay? In the class presentation, the two witnesses minister in which half of the tribulation period? That's according to the class presentation. The second half, right. In fact, number 6, take that one too. Oh, we'll have Austin do that one. In the class presentation, the events on the scroll take place in which half? That's the entire scroll.
In the second half.
Second half, which we do have the time notations. And, okay, Sam, let's do number 7. The sixth trumpet and the first, this is true false, you got a 50-50 chance. The sixth trumpet and first woe were the same thing.
False.
That's false. The sixth trumpet is which?
That's the second one.
Second woe, right. Okay, you did so well on that one, I'm going to let you take the next one too, which is also true false. The woes are worse than the seals.
Yes.
That would be true, because remember, you have the concept of birth pains, things are getting worse and worse. Okay, Selena, you'll take number 9, please. What takes place in heaven when the seventh trumpet is blown? Found in chapter 11, but also in 19. The seventh trumpet sounds, and what happens in heaven?
Is that the 30 minutes of silence?
No, that's earlier in the tribulation. Because, Zach? Oh,
Sorry. Is that the one where the censer is thrown to earth?
or what?
Is that the one where the censer is thrown to earth and you have the thunder and the
No,
peals?
that's earlier also.
Earlier also.
Zach, you gonna give it?
I'll take a whack. No. So, is it where they proclaim, well, right before they proclaim that the earth is God's?
Yeah. Remember, it's the rejoicing in heaven. Hallelujah, the Lord our God reigns. And it's nearly identical in 11 with 19, which tells us time-wise where we have come. Okay, Adriana, yours is number 10. When is Satan cast out of heaven?
Second half. But
Not quite.
it's not second half? I know that's not the answer, the way that you want, right? But I thought it was towards the end. Oh, okay, then I don't know.
Well, now think for a moment. You aren't. He goes forth with great wrath after that, after he's cast out. So when's he cast out? Liz, run Benware out.
Is it right in the center?
Right, the midpoint, the halfway point, which we'll see today is a time when a lot of things happen, a lot of things flow together at at the midpoint. Okay, Candy, can I get you on number 11?
Okay.
Who gives help to Israel? The woman.
Foreign nation.
Okay, that's the wilderness, Gentile nations. So yeah, and that is mentioned twice there in chapter 12. Gideon, how about number 12 for you? Besides Satan, what names are given for him in Revelation 12? He has a whole bunch of names given there in the story of Israel's persecution. He's called Satan, which, by the way, means the accuser. What else?
He's portrayed as the beast.
No, that would be, the beast would be a reference to the Antichrist, a human being. So and there's a close association, but the beast is not a title given to Satan. Anna.
The serpent of old.
Okay, he's called the serpent of old, which emphasizes what kind of behavior? Deception, right? He's a deceiver. Okay, there's a couple of other names. Austin?
The dragon.
The dragon, which probably is emphasizing his ferocity, is, you know, just a violent kind of beast. Okay, there's actually one more.
The devil.
The devil. The devil. Which has the idea of being an adversary. Okay, so there's a number of names given to him. Ben, let's try number 13 here. In 2 of the judgments, what percentage of the world's population perish?
About like 50%, right?
50%, right. Remember we pointed out that one-fourth and then 1/3 of a number always is a half. And so that does tell us that the carnage is great, unbelievably great. Okay, Alexa, number 14 for you, please. What are the 4 evidences of God's wrath in the Old Testament?
Wild beasts.
Wild beasts, famine,
Pestilence.
what?
Pestilence. Disease.
Oh, disease, and okay, what? Okay, plagues or disease would be the same thing. Okay, maybe there's still one missing. Sword. Yeah. So, sword, famine, plague, disease, and wild beasts of the earth are all evidences of the hot anger of God, the wrath of God, as the prophets express it. Okay, Isaac, you got number 15, please. What scripture tells us that the church is exempt from the wrath of God? Just book and chapter. Let's start with book. Remember, twice in this book, the statement is made that we have been delivered out of the wrath to come.
Is it like 2nd Thessalonians?
It's like 2 Thessalonians, but not 1 Thessalonians. Okay, you have to remember the chapters. If I should, on the exam, ask you for chapters or scripture references, which that wouldn't be a major issue, but I always want book and chapter. I'm never looking for verses. I mean, if you find the chapter, you're going to be in the book. You'll find it eventually. Okay. 1 Thessalonians what?
4.
What?
1 Thessalonians chapter 4.
No, that's the rapture. But that's what are the 2 chapters in 1 Thess? 1, 1 and 5. 1 and 5. Yeah. I asked Wade if he had talked about that on Sunday, and he said that he passed by it. They did touch on it, but lightly. Okay. All right, let's see. I've asked you one. That's John. Zach. I don't want to feel, I don't want to, Julie. I haven't asked you one. So, I just don't want you to feel bad, I mean, Jesse, it took him a while to get over, that he was left out. 16. Where do the locusts come from and how long do they afflict people? First of all, where did they come from? What's the place that's given? Indiana?
The abyss.
Okay, abyss or bottomless pit. And how long will they afflict people?
5 months.
5 months, yeah. Kind of a strange judgment because nobody dies, but it apparently is a nightmare. So, okay, Zach, have I asked you to do one yet? Well, 17 is yours. What are the 2 Old Testament names?
Sodom and Egypt.
Sodom and Egypt. Something that John does in the book of Revelation to communicate ideas quickly. He uses names like Jezebel, like Sodom, like Egypt, like Babylon. I forget if I have another one here. Oh, I do. Okay. Hannah?
Yeah.
What are the series of judgments called? How many are there and
What? Oh, okay.
how many series of judgments are there and what are their names? What do we call them? Series, not individual judgments, the series of judgments. The groupings.
Like the seals, trumpets, and bowls?
Like the seals of
Oh,
trumpets
okay.
and the bowls.
Okay.
Those three, you got it. Okay, just to try to remember, where did we say that, as far as our example is concerned, the seals, the concept of a sealed scroll, where does that come out of? What Old Testament prophet? Comes out of Ezekiel. And what about the trumpets? Where would that most likely come from? What Old Testament book? Well, you're in the right category. It's Numbers, but it's all given down there at Mount Sinai. Of course, when Leviticus was given as well. And what about the bowls or the cup of God's wrath that they're going to drink down to the very dregs? What? It's not Psalm 2, but it does come out of the Psalms, and it's Psalm 75. But again, what we're simply trying to do periodically is say, hey, look, this stuff that John is writing down, it has the references back in the Old Testament. This is where it's coming from. So the imagery comes from there. Okay, here we are, back at our little chart again. And I hope you are getting the idea that the idea of prophesying again becomes a major heads up in the book of Revelation. Because as we work through the birth pains, and as we just mentioned, the 7th trumpet blows, which means the 3rd woe is coming, and the bowl judgments are coming, and the response in heaven is that of rejoicing, and they project to the nearness of the second coming of Christ. And so as we move through 9 and 11, we begin to recognize, hey, we're really at the end of Daniel's 70th week. But obviously, Jesus doesn't come back until Revelation 19, and so we kind of got to figure out, well, what's happening here? Well, chapter 10, verse 11, is one of those verses that really is quite important in the interpretation of the book, because John is being told to prophesy again. And we looked last time at chapter 11 and the what's on the scroll, the 2 witnesses, and then we saw that Israel is persecuted, and both of those have time elements involved of 1,260 days, time times half a time, and 42 months. We're going to be looking at the Antichrist in chapter 13, which is a chapter that we've actually looked at. When we're in Daniel 7 with the little horn, we were back and forth with 13, so it's somewhat familiar territory. And then we, of course, have the what we call Armageddon, even though that doesn't take up in the entire second half, but there's no time notation given there. Let me clarify something as well. When I said that Armageddon is not a battle, it's a campaign, and someone raised the question, exactly what do you mean? Well, when we talk about a campaign, a military campaign, it's a series of battles taking place in various places, maybe involving even different armies. And so when we talk about Armageddon, it really is a series of battles, and it is wide-ranging. It's not isolated to the plains of Megiddo. So we'll look at that in just a few moments. So if you're ready to go, let's. We've got some territory we've got to cover today. Revelation chapter 13 about the Antichrist. There are a number of names given for this man, and these are not all of them, but they certainly give to us a perspective of his character and what God's viewpoint is of him. He is called the Beast, and when that term is selected, Therion, it's a term that has the idea of a wild, ravenous, untamed animal, not your house cat or your puppy or your goldfish. Talking about just a ravenous, wild, untamed, vicious, ferocious, out of control animal. He is also called the Antichrist, and we noted from the way back in Daniel 7 that really it's only found one time in Scripture, and that's in 1 John. And so, but as things happen, that's the name that's kind of stuck with him, and so we use it, but we recognize that it's only found in one place. And again, Christ means the anointed one. Anti carries with it two ideas. Remember what we said those two ideas were? Anti-Messiah, anti-Christ. Okay, one is the idea of against, which is the way that we normally would use the word for anti-abortion or whatever. It's against something. And what was the other way in which the Greek term anti is used? Because it does help us see this guy act more accurately. Remember?
Is it opposite of, or?
No.
Kind of like a counterfeit? Or
Yeah, right. One is the opposite, anti, and the other is has the idea in place of. So we would say that what he's going to be doing, I think, probably in his miracle working and his great boasts and pronouncements, his actions, like taking the seat in the temple in Jerusalem, that this guy is not against the true Messiah, but he's going to apparently present himself rather boldly, rather decisively as the Messiah. So he is a substitute Messiah. Paul refers to him by a couple of terms in 2 Thess, the man of lawlessness, which means that he doesn't break the speed limit all the time. The laws of God would be in view. When it comes to God's standards, God's righteousness, he's a lawless individual. And he's the son of perdition, the son of hell, which again is designed to give him something of his characteristic. We could add other terms to that, couldn't we? Like we could call him the Roman prince out of Daniel 9. The prince of the people is to come. So there's other designations for him, but these Particularly the first two are the most common ones concerning him. On the chart on page 59 in your notes, we have the career of the Antichrist, and this is my attempt to just sort of give an overview, pulling together stuff we've already seen, and kind of putting it all together. And then I want to read through some things about him and about the second beast as well. So if we were to look at the career of the Antichrist, I'm suggesting that there are four distinct phases or parts to it, how we might express it. The rapture of the church will take place, and when the rapture takes place, we would assume, unless things happen really quickly, that this man is the leader of some Western nation coming out of the fourth beast. The little horn comes up later and soon becomes dominant. But he, at that point, of course, is simply one horn, one nation, one king. Then, as we have looked at Daniel and suggested maybe from Revelation 6:2, the first seal, that he now, through his actions, will become dominant over a total of 11 nations, taking 3 of them by force, and then 7 others who are part of this unit. Will fall into line. For a long time, people who looked at prophecy spent considerable effort trying to figure out the European Union, and as they added more nations to it, it got far beyond 10, and so we don't know exactly how it will be played out. What we do know is that, like with Britain exiting the European Union, there may be others that follow, and there may be a reconfiguring of all of this, where you have perhaps ending up with 10 dominant nations in Europe. We don't know how it's going to happen, but the point is that he will defeat 3 of them, and the other 7 will come into line, whoever those might be. And then that most significant of all events, according to Jesus, the sign of where we are, the infamous abomination of desolation, which comes out of Daniel. Daniel, remember, mentions it 3 times. Once, historically, of Antiochus IV, the other 2 times of the Antichrist. And of course, when Jesus talked about it in Matthew 24, he's obviously not talking about something in the past history, because he's looking ahead to the abomination of desolation taking place. This is one of the midpoint events, and which launches the second half of the tribulation period, in which the Antichrist rises to the zenith of his power and influence as he becomes world ruler. We'll see in chapter 13, for a period of 42 months. That, as we saw in the statue vision, as we saw in the vision of the 4 beasts, as we shall see in Revelation 19, that rule, that reign, comes to a very dramatic end through the coming of Christ, which then leads to this the 4th phase of his life, which is eternal, and that is he will be placed into the lake of fire. So that's trying to pull together in a way that we can visualize it, what the scriptures tell us about this guy as far as his well, his career is concerned. And again, we've got to believe that Satan, who does not know when the end times will come, has always had someone, maybe even several someones available, who would become this great end time figure. Does he have someone today? Absolutely. Who is it? I have no idea. But he's there. So if the rapture were to occur, in the next few weeks or something, I think Satan would be going to work immediately on working on this individual. Now, if you have your Bibles, let's take a look at chapter 13. And again, most of this now is familiar territory to us, so we can kind of move fairly quickly through it. The text begins, and he, or some versions read, I stood, but he stood on the sand of the seashore, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, which of course is familiar terminology to us now, having 10 horns and 7 heads. I say, well, that's a new wrinkle. Yeah, hold off on that one. It's going to be mentioned. It is mentioned several times, but it's not explained. The 10 horns we understand. The 7 heads we don't. But that will be explained in chapter 17. So we're going to hold off and just take it for now as the description. So this beast comes up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, which is the picture of rulership, authority, and on his heads were blasphemous names. And of course, anytime you see that term, the word means to speak against something, in this case sacred, speak against the true God. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And that, of course, has a very familiar ring going back to Daniel's 4 beast vision in Daniel chapter 7. But now we're told something that's new. And it is that the dragon, who's already been identified out of chapter 12 as the devil and Satan and the serpent of old, the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. So we would assume that what that's looking at is shall we say, the enhancing of the kind of authority. If he's already a world ruler, this is now far beyond that. In verse 3, we have the first of 3 statements in Revelation 13 about the demise, apparent demise of the Antichrist, the beast. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. You will hear repeatedly that when people look at this passage, that the Antichrist is perhaps mortally wounded and come back to life. But the word is fatal. His fatal wound is healed. He does die. Verse 4. And verse 3. And the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. So that in connection with this receiving of a fatal wound, the world now stands in awe. It's generally mankind is impressed by what happens. And what happens is that they worshiped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him? And there was given to him, this would mean given to him by Satan, a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies. And of course, we saw that way back in Daniel 7, that the little horn was characterized by boasting and his arrogance. Arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. So clearly the focus here is not on his early days, but on the last half of the tribulation period. And so these time notations of 42 months, 1260 days, times, and half a time are basically saying half of Daniel's 70th week.
So the beast, like, he enters the stage, I guess, like the first part of the tribulation.
Sure, right.
So he's like kind of gathering up power at that point. But how does he control like nations when like the world is kind of falling apart?
Well, what do you mean? So it becomes...
Because like all the judgments and stuff happening throughout
Yeah.
that period.
And that's part of the interesting task, to try to see where some of these things are taking place. But why is it that Adolf Hitler, this really this guy who was a loser in so many ways, how did he end up as chancellor and, you know, the god of Germany?
Because Germany was desperate.
Exactly. You go back and you look at the economic times, the chaos that was existing. I mean, we think what goes on today as people, two sides of the aisles yelling at each other and saying all kinds of nasty things and calling for Trump's impeachment and, you know, all kinds of stuff. We think that's bad. But Germany was in chaos. The world is going to be in chaos, and along is going to come a man who says, I can fix it, I am the answer, and because he has Satan's power, he will apparently be able to pull stuff off. Because remember, who is under the authority whose authority is over the nations of the world? Satan. And so Satan will have a large role in bringing these nations under his authority. Exactly how, we aren't given the details of the action steps that are involved here. But the reality is that for 42 months he will, generally speaking, bring the nations of the world together. We'll talk about Armageddon when we get there. But I think it has to do with the climate in the world. And really that's a very common reaction. If you are in a society, in a situation where things have come unglued, everything is falling apart, there is no law and order, there's just chaos, economic chaos, there's danger in the place. And somebody comes along and says, I can fix this. I can do this, I can do that, and persuades people will follow him. Even if they have to give up personal rights, they want order. They don't want chaos. So exactly all will happen, we're not sure, but what we do know is that the dragon gave him his power, his throne, his great authority. So Satan is very deeply involved in this. In verse 7, and it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority over every tribe and people and nation was given to him. And all those who dwell on the earth will worship him. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb. So everybody's going to worship him. Oh, by the way, not those who are in the book of life. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. Okay, let's take a look at, pulling this together. There's two beasts in Revelation 13. One we've never heard of before, never been talked about in Scripture before, but here's the first beast, who we call the Antichrist. And again, I'm just pulling together some basic facts we already know. He is from a Western nation. He rules 11 nations. His power, authority come from Satan. He is killed, and we'll see the 2 other verses coming up. And he returns to life. He rules the world. He becomes the object of worship along with Satan. There is a very close connection between the Antichrist and Satan in the second half of the tribulation period. So, all of this is ground that we've plowed before, but Revelation 13 now gives us clarifications of a lot of things that were begun in Daniel 7 and the information about the little horn. What is brand new, however, not revealed anywhere else before this, is the existence of another beast. And it's pretty common for people to confuse these two, but they are distinctive. Revelation 13 and verse 11. And I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. Now, it's really hard to know what's being said. The first beast comes out of the sea, which is Gentile nations. Some have said, well, if this must be in contrast then with that, namely that he comes from the earth or the land, so he's a Jew. But if that were the case, you would think that John would use something other than the generic term of earth. So others have suggested that the contrast is between earth and heaven. In other words, this man is not one sent from God, even though he appears to be a religious figure. This is one of those things, class, that you can look at it and look at it, and you hear people's explanations or ideas, and there are a number of them, and we just don't really know. There's just, it's such an enigmatic statement that we aren't sure. I'm positive that when the moment of his emergence comes around, it's going to be rather obvious what this means. So I don't want to take a lot of time on this because I don't know what it really means. Is he Jewish? I don't know. Does he come from, we know he doesn't come from God, so that may be what the thing is here, and I guess at this point I'd say, well, that's probably what's being said, but there may be more to it that we don't know. He had 2 horns like a lamb, which the emphasis upon being a lamb seems to point to him as a religious figure. That's unclear, but later on he will lead in the worship of the Antichrist and Satan, which is clearly a religious activity. So for now, it would appear that there's a certain religious side to this man. Some people have suggested that it will be the Pope, some religious figure who will get involved. Well, we can't make that kind of a determination, but he may be a religious figure. But clearly, there's a connection between him and Satan also, as he spoke as a dragon. And that, starting with chapter 12 and verse 3, the dragon has been mentioned quite often. Well, let's notice some things about him. In verse 12, he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. Now, let me explain that. This man is going to be a miracle worker, and he gets his authority really from the dragon and from the Antichrist. So when it says in his presence, it doesn't mean that the only time he can work miracles or do what he does is when the Antichrist is around. It has the idea of being under his control. So there is no question in the text that beast number 2 is subservient to beast number 1. Now, the religious character of this man is also seen in the name that he is given. The name he is given of the false prophet. Now, you won't find that name here in chapter 13, but when Jesus comes back and he is going to seize the beast and the false prophet, and the false prophet is described in terms of chapter 13, Revelation 19:20. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet, who performed the signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast, and those who had worshipped his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire. In chapter 20 and verse 10, and the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are also. So twice after the fact, in Revelation 19:20 and Revelation chapter 20 and verse 10, this guy is called the false prophet. And so his duties, his activities are clearly of a spiritual, religious nature, which doesn't rule out other elements, but that seems to be somewhat of the focus. So going back to verse 12 for a moment. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, or under his control. And he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. We almost can see him as kind of like the high priest of this new religion, which worships the Antichrist and Satan. Now notice verse 13. And he performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And who is the prophet who called down fire out of heaven in the Old Testament? Elijah. Right. To the poor schmuck on earth at this time, here comes this guy along, and he calls down fire from heaven. He claims to be the, who do you think? Elijah, as the forerunner to the Messiah. And this is why Jesus made the statement that he did about this in Matthew 24. He says he will show great signs and wonders, so as to mislead or to deceive, if possible, even the elect. You see, what is going to be done by this man, the false prophet, he is going to do Christ-like miracles, God-like miracles. And the idea, I think, is that unless God had not had his hand upon believers and potential believers, they would fall for it. That this guy is the Christ, and this is Elijah, the announcer of him. So, in verse 14, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs, the sign miracles, the supernatural manifestation. These are not tricks. This is not magician's sleight of hand. These are power displays. The signs which was given him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. There's the third reference in this 13th chapter, referencing his assassination, his killing, and his coming back to life. The idea of the sword, which is in this, verse 12, is a reference to a violent death, a death that would indicate assassination. Verse 15. So the idea is we're going to make an image to this guy. Probably, and guess where they'll put it? Any ideas? Into the Jerusalem temple. I mean, this is following the pattern of Antiochus IV. This is why Antiochus IV is given so much space in the book of Daniel, because we're to learn from him what's going to take place in the future. Verse 15, and there was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast. Wow. That the image of the beast might even speak, and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Wow. Don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but we are talking about tremendous demonic energizing and demonic deception, and maybe this is a flashback to Daniel 3. Remember that you have all these people bowing down to worship Nebuchadnezzar's golden image except for 3. And what was the result of that going to be? Death. And that's kind of what's here. You don't want to worship the image? You're dead. And he will put to death. Somehow, some way, rather supernaturally, apparently. And he causes, okay, here we get to the famous stuff. He causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, and the freemen and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. Famous mark of the beast. And he provides that no one should be able to buy or sell, just the basics of economic life, except one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Boy, it always bothers me because I have yet to figure this out, which indicates I don't have much wisdom currently. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. So, this business of the mark of the beast comes to play at the halfway point. I've received, questions and emails from people I don't know, asking about, I had one guy about a year ago write and say, I am really, I got to admit, I'm really scared. I'm scared that I'm going to get the mark of the beast, and it goes on and on. And, I wrote back, among other things, look, don't worry about it, okay? If you're a believer in Jesus, you're not going to be around. The mark of the beast is not something that happens now. The mark of the beast isn't even in the first part of the tribulation. The mark of the beast is at the halfway point when you have the world domination and world control. The Antichrist is going to control the world economically, politically, militarily, and religiously. I mean, this is absolutely control of mankind. So, let me put up some things about the second beast. He is known as the false prophet. He is not greater than the Antichrist, but he is more of a subordinate. He is a religious leader, most likely. His duties are religious, and if this religion of Satan and the Antichrist is a formalized religion, he's probably the high priest. He works miracles. The Antichrist apparently works miracles as well, but this guy is noted for that, even making fire come down out of heaven, and you can only imagine the claims that will come along with that. He leads the world, all the earth, in the worship of the Antichrist and Satan. And he also carries out, not sure who sets it up, but he carries out the controlling of the economic of the world with the mark of the beast, 666. And we will see in chapter 18 that apparently those who align themselves with the Antichrist, there are some people who live well in the tribulation period, just like in Nazi Germany, just like in Soviet Russia, with bombs bursting in air, chaos everywhere. There are people who are living large because they have become wealthy by the system and by being a part of the system. So this second beast is a guy unknown in the Old Testament. Unknown until we get to the book of Revelation. But enough is given that we begin to develop an understanding that he is going to be a key guy, the right-hand man of the beast, the cheerleader for the beast, the high priest for the beast, the senior vice president of economics. This guy is apparently quite a guy. In fact, he becomes part of the what people call the unholy trinity: Antichrist, Satan, and the false prophet. Okay, so that blurb comes on the scroll. This information is given there, and it does add to and ties up things that are given previously about. Any questions about this guy or these two? Again, some of this is repeat performance from what we looked at before.
When you mentioned that the second beast only performed miracles in the presence of the Antichrist,
Yeah.
correct? How come the English translates it in his presence if it would be better understood as under his control?
By his authority, under his I don't know. It's the same thing I would ask about why, in light of certain theological ideas in preterism, why is it that the translation is that Jesus says, "I'm coming shortly"? Well, why don't we go with what it really says is suddenly? And I don't know. I'm not one of the didn't translate it, so I don't know what the dynamics were in coming up with the translation.
So we know that it's that
It's by his authority.
you know that through looking at the Hebrew, the Greek.
The Greek, yeah. That's what
Okay.
it is saying. And I think that's why you get so many translations. People finally said, "Hey, come on, let's get them up." So you have, the New International, the new, really new American Standard, the Steel Workers Bible, the Housewives Bible. And, you got all these translations that come churning out. Okay, let's take 10, 15 minutes. We'll start at a quarter after, or maybe as much as 18 after. Okay? Then we'll look at the rest of the scroll. How are things back home?
Fire just decides to go up.
Randomly, arbitrarily,
Now you say hello to Sarah for me, okay?
always.
She, what does she do? What do you guys do in the winter back there?
Well, she's actually working for a friend of ours doing accounting work for them right now.
What kind of work?
Accounting.
Oh, okay.
So it's something that's keeping her busy right now.
That would be indoor work, wouldn't it?
Of course, she's still got her kids in town.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. All right, I'm gonna get some coffee. I wanna
Do it.
Stay
awake, Ernest.
I gotta stay awake. It's always bad with the teacher calls.
When the teacher calls, it's like, kind of sets a poor person.
It does, it does. Yeah. There was a guy really old teacher. I mean, he was long past it. And he couldn't stand, so he would sit. And this is when I was at Master's College, I was teaching, and my student helper was in his class, and she said, you won't believe what happened. She said, he sits in a chair, and he said he was lecturing on, I forget, Shakespeare or something. And all of a sudden, and she said, what do we do? I mean, what do the students do? It's in the middle of class time, and the teacher has fallen asleep. I mean, it's so rude to get up and walk out. So I said, what'd you do? I said, well, we just sat there. He said, all the way comes, and he started talking about a different subject. I don't know what it was, but he was out for about 5 minutes. So it has happened.
Oh my goodness!
That's why I got to get
Talks about a different subject.
Yeah.
Just like you've been talking the whole time and it led to the other subject.
Yeah, who knows?
He's having an internal dialogue.
Yeah, I love it. But, so it has happened where a teacher has fallen asleep during their own lecture.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I'm just thinking.
And then for glasses, and shoes and everything, just take $5 off of what you owe me.
Yeah, I put 5 bucks into it last time.
Yeah, so I'll put just take this at 37 or whatever, you know, so yeah, just take 5 off of that.
Hello.
Sorry, I almost closed it.
No, before. No, that was before. Okay, I'm not very fast. I have to take a break every like 5 minutes and go back and note everything, otherwise it won't say over. I can remember it. But yeah, as far as stretching between writing and listening, for this only goes for about 5 minutes. So if he gets to a point where he can tell he's kind of going on a funny trail, then like after he sees, go back and note everything from the past 5 minutes and then keep doing what you're listening. But I don't know, I'm finding this class really interesting, so I haven't really been doing that. The past when I was classes, I would be writing papers and stuff during class. Because it takes so many funny shells because you're writing the papers during class. Yes. But he takes so many bunny trails, and they're awesome bunny trails. But like, it gives me a chance to note everything that he was talking about. Exactly. Medical class. I'll be like referencing stuff too.
Good.
You answer well. Good job.
That's good.
Good job.
Dun, dun, dun. I think this is what I'm gonna do today. I'm gonna finish my first question. And then I'm gonna take a nap.
Good.
And then I'm gonna wake up. I'm gonna try to use some crazy makeup. Like the eyeshadow colors I've never tried.
Good.
And then I'll go to dinner. And then I'll see if I can finish question 2 on it.
Do it.
This time next week, she will be close to landing.
Yes. It's in the
I'm so excited. I feel bad though.
Oh, I would.
Oh, but
I would.
Wednesday and Thursday, it's pretty much just gonna be like
Well, then you're looking
sitting
at
around here.
Florida, so.
Yeah. Like, just
Because it's going.
want me to do. Because I said, and you know how annoying I can be when I feel insecure. And she goes, I'm not exactly sure of what you were saying. I said, are you talking about the 2 of them approaches and stupid things? At least he didn't say
Yeah. This is one of the adjustments.
Like finish writing.
No, the first one that
I feel like she's mad. I don't know. I can never tell her when she's either gonna be like, oh haha, Adriana, you're so funny, or she's gonna be like, wow, Adriana, that was so stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I can predict, but not really enough.
Which ones?
I think it would be the next one.
I don't think a lot of people are gonna do seals, so I'm going to seals.
Yeah. That always was fun. Do that. And that's what a lot of people need to.
You can tell that's why I don't think a lot of people are gonna do it, because the instructions in the book are more intense. Ben? What? What? Just look at it. Whoa.
Oh, you got us more water?
What?
I just kidding.
You want some?
No. My soul, worship sing like me. Oh, that's so cute. I like to play this one.
Hey, Jesse, what you doing?
Levi.
Oh, Levi. That makes
Oh,
sense.
I saw that one.
Yeah. And when I
Yeah,
opened
mine's
all
all
of it,
Yeah, I saw that too.
That makes.
I just love that.
Why? You're a Levite? Hey, where's Ben? I need him to.
You will be finding cookies for a while.
I have no idea.
Did you guys actually like pick through your room?
High and
Low and
No,
mid-range?
unless someone.
Like balance on the bathroom stall door.
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought one of you guys literally spilled coffee all over my dresser because the water leaks from the roof. And it had leaked while we were gone, so it leaked onto the dresser. And then it leaves like this muddy residue. So I was like, why did they spill coffee?
Wait, your roof is leaking?
Yeah, yeah.
Two.
But ours has a vent. Ours is leaking because we didn't shovel snow off the roof. There's.
It comes
So
off the
Which is
wood
the
that holds
You
up
think,
the
oh yeah,
roof
sword, I
and the lock.
understand, you know, the
Yeah.
wild beasts.
Yeah.
That's sort of, that is sort of like the one that gives you the heads up, like, we're talking
Kind
about
of
something
disgusting.
specific.
That's another thing I noticed.
Yeah, thank you.
I actually treated the wood in your hands as well. Well, that means we don't deal with this much wood. Yeah.
Part of your loft is caving in, as I was showed when we did the open house.
Yeah.
Someone went up and was like, check this out, and like bounce up and down. Like,
Oh, Lydia's
like,
part?
check it out.
Well-
We're like, yeah, don't walk there.
Amen.
It's a new day.
So you have like crumbles in there.
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
There's a crumble like drinking, stressful issues.
Wednesday, my dudes.
I don't get it.
I know, that's something good. He doesn't do that, but he used to do
Is that and Mark and Mitch and John?
What?
Then Matthew Mark would do that.
I don't know if I ever got ordered.
Wow,
That
that
would be awesome. though.
hacks, right?
Yeah, but like, we
Gosh.
have family follow through.
Gosh.
Doing it right. I don't know, I picked it out, but,
I did. I didn't. I
No.
haven't wrapped it yet.
I didn't know it was there.
No, everyone got them, I think. My mailbox is so full of stuff right now. I'm pretty sure I have a sweatshirt in there right now.
You have a sweatshirt in your
It's a
sweatshirt in
fleece.
your Hey, good job.
Hey, don't test me.
Hey, I will always test you.
Just don't hurt me.
Very well done.
1 minute. We're 1 minute up.
I love that.
Coffee and stuff.
I'm in good shape. I can keep going for a little while longer here.
Yeah.
How are you feeling this morning, Les?
Derek looks like you're
You look tired.
servant when you eat your coffee.
I know.
Bye,
After
Ben.
you
We're part of
leave
the
the walk.
No?
Just literally walked in. I like my mug.
I woke up with a pretty bad headache.
Really?
So,
It always like whenever I have like a thermos or a covered one, it stays too hot,
so it's
and then my mouth burns. I don't have very much heat tolerance in my mouth, so it's like when I drink super hot coffee, it just burns, and then I.
What shoes get blinding ones? Is that the kind that gets really?
Remember that? I won that game. Abs. I won. I beat Jess at 18 man. Foosball. Not 18 man, but
Yeah, yeah.
that looks so trippy.
Kind of messes up the next day.
Scandalous. No, I'm just kidding. But well, I got me.
It's scandalous.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, is Lynette here? Yes. Lynette here, yeah. Zach is here. Liz is here. Austin is here. Okay, boys and girls, let us return to our desks and get out our pencils and get back to work. In this next segment, I'd like to try to do chapters 14, 15, and 16. So put the pedal to the metal just a little bit. Okay, let's reorient ourselves again, getting back to our, hopefully, now familiar chart, where you have John given this scroll, told to prophesy again, and the two witnesses, 1260 days, the persecution of Israel for 1260, Antichrist for 42 months. We're looking at the second half, and now, well, it doesn't fill the entire second half. The focus is now on this great end time event, and you know, one of the things that Liz said, the question that she asked, sort of reminded me that one of the tasks that we have as we go through this is to try to figure out, we really don't have a lot of time for this, but okay, while we're talking about chapters 11, 12, and 13, we are also going on in the world are the trumpet judgments and the bowl judgments, and to try to figure out exactly what this is going to look like with Israel being persecuted and the Antichrist activities and so on. You know, exactly how it's going to flow is a little, well, it's very difficult to try to really nail down those kinds of specifics, and it doesn't get any better at the end because the sequence of events is very compact, and so it's hard to say exactly when the bowl judgments occur in connection with some other activities like the army of 200 million coming from the east and so on. But we do our best to try to at least put things in the location where they will happen. And that occurs, applies to what we call Armageddon. So we are on page 60 of your notes, and the prophecy of the great harvest, which this chapter is basically giving us the ultimate victory of Jesus Christ. So let's take a look at it and see what we can. In chapter 14, and I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. So, we have the 144,000 mentioned here, and so the question is, who are they? And so, the key to this is what John does not say. If John were to, back up, the number 144,000 is a very unique number. And we would assume that this 144,000 is the same group that we're given in chapter 7. And we're simply going to get more information. We would assume that what John would have done is he would have said something like, I saw another 144,000. He would say something which lets us heads up, this is not the same group, folks, that I was talking about in chapter 7. He does not do that, and so that really leads us to the conclusion that, that this is the same group that's found in chapter 7. There's no reason to assume otherwise. The next question is, where does this take place? Well, it says the Mount of Olives, and yet you hear voices and singing in heaven. So, what is it? Is it heaven, on earth? And the answer is probably that it's on earth, because this seems to be looking at Zechariah chapter 14, when Messiah comes and his feet stands on the Mount of Olives. And probably at this time the idea is that all of creation is rejoicing in the victory of Christ as he has come back to the Mount of Olives. And so remember, these 144,000 were sealed, which suggests to us that they were protected. And we find them here, all 144,000. None of them would have died, is the point, and gone to heaven. They would have remained on earth throughout their lifetime, because they were sealed, or they were protected from the judgments and from God and from the activities of Satan. Now, they are described, which they weren't described in chapter 7. We simply were given the number. But if you look at verse 4, it gives us the picture is of a group of men who are absolutely and totally separated, in a most unique way, separated to the Lord. These are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they have kept themselves chaste. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased from among men as firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouth. They are blameless. And so these descriptions of them are all pointing to the fact that they are uniquely separated unto the Lord God. Now, the only troubling one is the one where they have not been defiled with women. And and we know, so we wonder what's being said about them. Well, we know that marriage and sexual relations in marriage are not defiling. They're part of God's plan and purpose and for the benefit of man. But what we have here is likely very similar to what Jesus said about discipleship. Remember, you must hate your father and mother. It's an extreme kind of statement, isn't it? But because the idea is not that you actually hate them, but that your relationship with Christ is so great, so close, that there's no second. It's almost like your love for Jesus is so great that any other relationship is almost like hate. Well, we understand it's really a figure of speech, and that's really the same variety of things that he's talking about here. These men apparently are unmarried. They have separated themselves from normal life, human life, because of their devotion to Christ. It's kind of what Paul said in his discussion of marriage and singleness in 1 Corinthians 7. Where Paul said, you know, it would be best if all of you people were like me, unmarried, given the time frame that we're in. In other words, he's saying, this is a time of persecution. It's hard to maintain normal family life and so on when it's a time of trouble. Well, the tribulation is even more so. And so they're probably unmarried, and simply a statement of their soul, complete, utter devotion to Christ. That's what's being looked at here. So I just think it's helpful because when you look in verse 4, that first phrase is the one that bothers people. What's he saying? Well, if you think of it in terms like you must hate your father and mother, then you're getting the idea of it all. The timing of it, because the Lamb is seen on the Mount of Olives, puts us in Zechariah chapter 14, and so we are at this point, and what I've tried to illustrate here with the little dark blue there is that would be Armageddon. That would be the last months of Daniel's 70th week, because this is now going to develop the concept of Armageddon a little bit when Christ is victorious and he gathers with these uniquely devoted followers, the 144,000. So what follows are two other subjects of unveiling. One of them, the thing that comes up next, are the three angelic announcements, and then just a brief word about the great end-time battle of Armageddon, which is the winepress of God's wrath. So, this last bit on the scroll is pulling together a number of different things to help clarify what the very end time events are going to look like right at the end of Daniel's 70th week. So, the angelic announcement in verses 6 to 12. The first announcement, if you look at verse 6, I saw another angel, because John had seen a lot of angels up to this point in time. And so that's what we were saying, is if this was a different group of 144,000, he would have used that term. I saw another 144,000. That he does not do. And I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, having an eternal gospel to preach to those who live on the earth, and to every nation and tribe and tongue and people. And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come." See, we're right at the end now. "And worship him who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and the springs of water." So, first of all, just a word of clarification here. The word gospel is a very familiar word to us, but it means good news. We've been taught that for a long, long time. But we need to understand that the term gospel or good news, the context determines what the good news is. And normally in the scriptures, in the New Testament, the word gospel has to do with the good news about Jesus Christ. The good news that he died for our sins and rose again victorious over Satan, over sin and death. So that's the good news. And so we have, wherever the word gospel is used, and whenever we use the term gospel, that's what we're thinking, which is fine, but we've got to keep in mind that sometimes in the New Testament, the term gospel does not mean the good news about Jesus Christ's death and resurrection. It has other good news in mind, and this is one of those places. Angels don't preach the gospel. That's been committed to men, hasn't it? God would set angels to proclaim about Jesus' death and resurrection, but the problem is that they don't have experientially any knowledge of what they're talking about. They're not redeemed beings. And so the good news is that, you've been enduring man's kingdoms and Satan's kingdoms and all the distressing. The good news is the kingdom of God is now at hand. It's coming. It's nearby. And it's an eternal kingdom. It will be the rule of God forever and ever and ever. And so that's the announcement of this first angel. And you can imagine, if we are just a couple of months before Jesus comes back at the second coming, that this is a valid message. Good news, good news. God's kingdom is about to come and be set up. The stone's going to smash the statue on its little pink toes at any moment now. Destroy the whole thing, and then we'll grow into a mountain. A second angel comes along, and verse 8, another angel, a second one, followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality." And this is a quote from Isaiah. But fallen, fallen is indicating the certainty of it all. Well, why would the angel say that? Well, because Babylon is reigning supreme at the moment. This is a name given now for the Antichrist's and Satan's rule. Babylon the Great. That's what chapters 17 and 18 will be about. It is simply mentioned here, but that's a real teaser. Come on, give us a little bit more. What do you mean? It's certainly going to fall. Can you give us more info on this? And the answer is, yeah, we will. Hang on. We're going to discuss it a little bit later on. In Revelation chapter 17 and 18. The third announcement. Another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast in his image and receives a mark on his forehead or upon his hand." Now, that has just been talked about, hasn't it? With what the second beast is going to do at the halfway point of Daniel's 70th week. So, buddy, here, by the way, this answers a question which sometimes people will ask when they start thinking about this. When they think about God's grace and the offer of salvation. Is it possible for a person in the tribulation period who has received the mark of the beast to be saved? And the answer here is no. Because, you know, they were not, you know, walking along the street and somebody grabs them and hauls them in and 5 big guys hold them down while they put a mark on the forehead or on the hand. In other words, no, don't do it. I don't want to be marked. No, that's not the way at all. It's a willful choice on their part. They have an understanding of what the issue is. And they prefer not to listen to the gospel of Jesus Christ, namely his death, resurrection, and the offer of salvation, which, remember, Matthew 24:14 is a very important verse, because Jesus said that the gospel of the kingdom, having to do with his gospel of his death and resurrection, plus the idea of his being the Messianic king. The gospel of the kingdom shall go throughout the entire world, and then the end comes. So that when we come to this point of Jesus standing on the Mount of Olives, fulfilling Zechariah 14, what we know for certain is there's not a person breathing on the planet who does not understand the gospel, who has not heard it. No matter where they are on the planet. I don't care if they're living in the deep recesses of the Amazon jungle. They have heard the gospel. How they've heard it, we aren't told, though certainly key to it all are the 144,000 and the 2 witnesses. So, this is an announcement, so everyone's got this straight. The beast, the Antichrist, is going to be judged. If anyone worships the beast in his image, receives a mark on his forehead, on his hand, he will also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which begins to point out something that apparently the bowl judgments target a more specific group, namely the Antichrist and those who have the mark of the beast. I suggested to you before, the seal judgments seem to be quite broad. Doesn't seem to be any exceptions. The trumpet judgment seems to narrow the focus to unbelievers. Kind of like, you say, well, how could that happen? Remember the plagues on Egypt? The first 4 plagues. Who got the first 4 plagues? Everyone, right. And then, I think it's beginning with the 5th plague. Maybe it's beginning the 4th plague. At any rate, the point is that God says from now on, Israel will be exempt from the rest. And so, how did God pull that off? You know, we aren't told, except that, you know, while the Egyptians are enduring darkness, for example, the Israelites are not. That's, of course, only something God can do. So it appears that in answer to the prayer of the martyrs, how long, O Lord, holy and true, before you avenge our blood, and then the way it's tied in with the trumpet judgments in chapter 8, it seems that the trumpet judgments narrow a bit, and then when we get to the bowl judgments, they are even narrower, focusing on those who have the mark of the beast. Now, again, notice, he will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength. The idea is there is no mercy in this judgment. God oftentimes tempers his judgment with mercy, not so on this one. In the full strength, in the cup of his anger, he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest, day and night, those who worship the beast in his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. By the way, this is not, you might want to keep this verse in mind, because within evangelicalism, there is coming a beginning to seep in the doctrine of annihilation. What's annihilation? What's the doctrine of annihilation?
After a little while in hell, you just disappear from here completely, just like burned away, and there's nothing left of you.
Yeah. It's the punishment, this is what the Jehovah's Witnesses hold. And this annihilation has been the domain of the cults for a long time. Because the idea is that, yeah, your judgment is eternal in the sense that it lasts forever, but it's not conscious. You're put out of existence. You're annihilated. You don't exist anymore. And so these verses say, no, 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 look, the guys with the mark of the beast, they are going to day and night will be suffering. So this is a verse which says, look, this is an eternal punishing is going on. Verse 12, here is the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. Better it is to be a follower of Jesus and endure the momentary wrath of the Antichrist than to be a follower of the Antichrist and experience the forever wrath of God. So, these three angels give announcements, all of which are letting us know, hey, heads up, we are right at the end. And then, verse 13, I heard a voice from heaven saying, right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow after them. And so there's that idea of better to be a follower of Christ and to die in the tribulation than to experience eternity in the lake of fire. Now, what follows is a picture of a wine press. In fact, verse 19 kind of summarizes it. And the earth swung, and the angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters of the vine of the earth and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood came out from the winepress up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 200 miles. Well, as you know, when harvest season came and the grapes were ripe, they would be cut and then taken to a wine press, which was usually a hollowed out stone area, and they would be stomped on, and the juice would be collected and the wine would ferment. And the picture here, and this is not the greatest, but at least gives you an idea of the map on the right. Don't worry about the one on the left. That the imagery of Armageddon is the gathering of the grapes, and what God does is to gather the nations of the earth together in the Middle East. And that's probably where the army of 200 million ends up, as well as others. They come into the Middle East. Why are they coming? Well, we aren't told. But they're headed for the land of Israel, which suggests to me, this is my interpretation, is that they are, all is not well in the empire of the Antichrist. Now, granted, he's got Satan and all of that, but men, being who they are, even without Satan's influence, don't like to be told what to do. They are rebels at heart. And you probably have nations that don't particularly like the Antichrist. And we don't know all of the dynamics. We don't know where allegiances might be and where the shifting alliances might take place. But the point is that they're headed for the Middle East. And God is gathering them into the winepress of his wrath. They apparently gather there to battle with one another in some way. When the sign of the Son of Man appears in the heavens, as Jesus says in Matthew 24, then whatever hostilities they had with one another, apparently, our enemy makes us friends, that the armies of the earth see the coming of Christ and focus their attention on him. And of course, then he comes and they are in fact destroyed. But they are coming into the wine press. Now that little dot there is about where Megiddo is located, an inland plain, huge broad area, the location of a number of battles in ancient Near East history. This is where King Josiah died, when Pharaoh Necho of Egypt was going up to battle Nebuchadnezzar at Carchemish. But it's been a place of warfare because it's a nice place to have a war. It's nice, big and broad, and you can get lots of people in there to slaughter one another, and it's just a cool place to do battle, you know? Well, so when chapter 16 talks about Har-Mageddon, or Megiddo, it's referencing that. But we also know that the battle, there are other locations of this campaign all the way down towards the Dead Sea and the Edom. So the text says that actually this end time campaign, and it has to do with the translation of the word stadia as to how many miles are involved. And so you'll read in different versions, different mileage from, 160 miles and so on. But the point is this, that the wine press is really big. And this is where the armies of the earth are being gathered together in the great wine press of the wrath of God. And the angel swung his sickle, and you have the trampling of the nations of the earth. This, by the way, goes hand in glove with what Isaiah talks about. Isaiah chapter 63. Listen to Isaiah 63. Who is this who comes from Edom, with garments of glowing colors from Bozrah? That would be down south. This one, it's a reference to Messiah. This one who is majestic in his apparel, marching in the greatness of his strength. It is I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. And then he is asked a question. Why is your apparel red? And your garments like the ones who tread in the winepress? When guys and gals would tread grapes, and their garments, they would hitch their garments up, so that. But still, if you're splashing around in the winepress, people could tell where you've been. I guess your feet are purple, but beyond that, your clothes, no matter how hard you try, like playing around a mud puddle, you're going to come up looking like you've been near a mud puddle, or in this case, you were treading the winepress. And so the question is asked of Messiah, why are your garments red like someone who's been in the winepress? Here's his answer, Isaiah 63, verse 3. I have trodden the wine trough alone, and from the peoples there was no man with me. I trod them in my anger and trampled them in my wrath, and their life blood is sprinkled on my garments, and I stained all my raiment. For the day of vengeance was in my heart, and my year of redemption has come. Verse 6, I trod down the peoples in my anger, made them drunk in my wrath, and I poured out their life breath on the earth. So Isaiah 63 is really the backdrop passage from the Old Testament for chapter 14 of Revelation. So this is something told to John in the scroll. A little bit more detail about end times, and as you can see, it even pulls together a little bit from the Old Testament passages, like Joel 3, which we didn't read from, but there it talks about in the valley of Jehoshaphat, vengeance coming, and we don't know exactly where the valley of Jehoshaphat is, but most think it's probably a reference, another name for one of the valleys surrounding, like the Kidron, surrounding Jerusalem. So when you look at all of the passages, the point is this, class. When you look at all the passages, this great end time battle rages over a large area of land. It is not isolated to Megiddo, though Armageddon or Megiddo is certainly one of the key places where this again will take place. So, all right, let's stop for just a minute. Let me ask you, we all understand now, one of the things that I want you to exit our study of Revelation with is seeing the flow, seeing the pattern of the book of Revelation. And so hopefully it's abundantly clear now. We said you need to interpret Revelation chronologically. That's the way it's presented. And sure enough, we worked our way through. We had a little bit of a timeout in chapter 7. We're in the midst of judgments. Oh, by the way, there is salvation during this time. Back to judgments. And so we move all the way through the tribulation. We get right to the very end. The seventh trumpet blows. We're now ready because the people in heaven say we're ready. We are ready for Jesus to come back again. Hallelujah. The Lord our God reigns. An angel appears. There's more information. Before we continue on with the judgments and the second coming, more information. Here's a scroll, John. Eat it. Assimilate it. And so he does. And that's chapters 11, 12, 13, and 14. Additional information given to us about, well, God's work of resisting, thwarting evil by the raising up of two witnesses who have supernatural powers and whose focus is in Jerusalem, but it's a worldwide ministry. So it isn't just the 144,000. God's got a couple of other really important guys. Who they are, we don't know for sure. We can guess, but we don't know. And then, Jesus said persecution's going to come to Israel. Let's develop that a little bit more. And so we have some further information given in chapter 12 about Israel, the woman, the Satan, the dragon, the male child, and the relationship of Satan, the dragon, to the woman. And, new fact, things are going to happen to the dragon. He's going to be booted out of heaven, and that's going to have a dramatic effect on what happens on the earth. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Antichrist. And so we learned stuff about him in Daniel 7, Daniel 9, Daniel 11. But now, and Paul gave us some information, but now we want to sort of wrap all this thing up and give additional information. And oh, by the way, there's actually another beast who is going to be key in the end times. We'll call him the false prophet. And then, a final word on Armageddon, which, if we had time in this class, which we don't, we would go back to a number of Old Testament passages that talk about this end time, particularly looking at passages like Joel chapter 3. We read something from Isaiah 63. But there are other passages where Revelation 14 is kind of pulling together some of these final end time battle events. Now, I don't have this in the notes per se, but I thought somewhere along the line I ought to stick in some of the events that we've looked at and an event that has not yet come. So let's imagine now, this is all out of size-wise, that we have the first half and second half, but the midpoint of the tribulation period, we know that there's a dramatic difference between the first half. The first half is not fun and games, but compared to the second half, it is. I mean, the second half is dramatically different, and it's because of the coming together of some key events that change everything, and of course, Jesus previews this when he says, that the second half is the tribulation, the great one. Well, first of all, a key event out of Revelation 13. Satan is cast out of heaven. And the text itself tells us that causes a huge difference, because he goes forth with great wrath, indicating that this is now clearly an enhancement of his activities. He's kind of like he was in second gear, and now he's in high gear, and the pedal is to the metal, because he knows he has a short period of time. He knows it's down to a 42-month period. Also, out of chapter 13, we've learned at this point in time that the Antichrist has been killed, but now he has come back to life again. And these first two events bring about the next one, which is the abomination of desolation, the establishing of an image and or the Antichrist himself in the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem. So this probably ties in with the two passages we've referenced. 2 Thessalonians 2, where the Apostle Paul says that he takes his seat in the temple of God, making himself out to be God. And then what we just saw, secondly, in Revelation 13, where you have this animated statue, the image of the Antichrist, which is to be worshipped by everybody in the world, and your loyalty is now going to be manifested by taking the mark of the beast, which is either his name or the number 666, either on your forehead or on your hand. What else happens is that all religion ends. From Daniel, we know that the sacrificial system, Old Testament, Levitical system, Judaism ends at the midpoint. We also, though we haven't learned about it yet, the great harlot, this which we believe is a religious system, comes to an end as well. And probably we would have to, in light of the statement that the whole world now worships Antichrist and Satan, all religions are done with. So Islam, Hinduism, all the rest of them are gone. They were used by Satan, useful to him until this point in time, and now Satan is getting what he's always wanted to get, right? I want to be like God. I want to be worshipped. And this 42-month period is the closest that he gets to fulfilling his dream. So these events all happen, and how they happen, sequentially, we could guess, we could try to figure it out. But the point is that it happens over a very short period of time. Okay. Now, hopefully that is kind of helpful, kind of puts everything together in one place. The great harlot, that is in Revelation 17, and Israel's worship, that of course is Daniel 9. All religions ending is just an assumption out of Revelation 13. All right, let's go back to the overview of Revelation based upon chapter 1 and verse 19, the things which shall take place. And where we have come now is down to the end of the tribulation period. We are now ready to take a look at, we are getting ready to take a look at the final series of judgments here in chapter 15 and 16, which of course are the trumpet judgments. So, the bowl judgment. Bowl judgments. Okay, we're going to do this quickly, and then we'll take a break. I want to get through the 16. So, with the end of 14, we have the end of the scroll. And so now, John is telling us that the vision is continued because he does what he does, and I saw. So I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous. 7 angels who had the 7 plagues, which are the last, because in them the wrath of God is finished. So this is declared that this next series of the plagues that will be poured out by these 7 angels, these are the last judgments of God. When we get to chapter 16, and the last judgment is actually poured out, the same statement is made. We're done. It's finished. It's over. The wrath of God is complete. And so you have a return return to the scene in heaven of the sea of glass, the crystal sea of rejoicing and singing in heaven. You have in verse 6 the 7 angels who had the 7 plagues came out of the temple. Verse 7, one of the 4 living creatures reappears. One of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. And the temple was filled with the smoke from the glory of God, from his power. No one was able to enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. And I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the 7 angels, "Go and pour out the 7 bowls of the wrath of God onto the earth." And so now we are having these 7 bowls. Not to be boring, but see it again. Trumpet 5, trumpet 6, trumpet 7, third woe, the bowl judgments. And so this is now what chapter 16 is going to quickly develop. Now again, these likely are coming in very rapid succession. No time, apparently, of any length comes between these judgments. They seem to be coming again and again and again quickly.
Sorry, you don't have to take much time on this. I was just curious because a lot of the bowl judgments that are issued kind of deal with things that have already been judged by Christ, like the oceans, which had already been occurred. Is it possible that maybe some of the signs that the other beasts did were repair some of the damage to earth?
Yeah, I mean it's okay. You think if 1/3 of the trees were burned up, kind of like the plagues upon Egypt. Did Egypt ever recover from the plagues? Yeah, they did over time. And so you can imagine, if you have even, you have huge fires like, 30 years ago, was it the Yellowstone fire, which, consumed huge amount. Well, obviously today there's a lot of growth back, but we came there the year of the fire, you could see it. The next year or 2, we came back and fire's gone, but you can see a lot of growth taking place. And if the trumpet judgments you know, if one of them is occurring right about a little after the midpoint, there would be time for probably some regeneration taking place. So you probably do have some of that taking place. Okay? All right. So, the first bowl is poured out, and I want you to note what helps reinforce what I was suggesting, that the target audience is the Antichrist and his followers, those with the mark of the beast, because that's exactly what's said in verse 2. The first angel went and poured out his bowl into the earth, and it became a loathsome and malignant sore upon the men who had the mark of the beast and who worshipped his image. Now, remember, on earth now, there's really three different groups of people. Those who have the mark of the beast. Secondly, followers of Jesus. But there's third, a group of unbelievers, right? Yeah, because, remember, even in connection with the second coming, you have people turning in faith to Christ. Well, if you have the mark of the beast, you can't do that. You've made a willful choice already. So, this is now poured out on the followers of the beast. And those who worship his image. Can't prove it, of course. But remember what Satan did to God's man Job? Remember the boils, the sores? I think that God is responding in kind to it by striking Satan's men, Satan's followers, those devoted to Satan with the same thing. I don't know what Job's boils were like, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same thing that we have here. Bowl judgment number 2. All of the oceans become blood. See, this is going from 1/3 to complete, which again reinforces the concept of birth pains. And again, as we mentioned before, the Save the Whales is really going to be dampened now because it's total destruction. Will we have whales? My wife wants to know if we have whales. She loves humpback whales. I think so. That's part of the new creation, no doubt. That.
So there will be an ocean.
A large body of water there will be, but not what we have today. Whatever the original Earth looked like, which would have included water sources and lakes and probably some smaller bodies of water. No Pacific Ocean.
Maybe some waves? Large ones?
You know, you'll have 1,000 years to come up with a wave machine if there isn't one. And so you can
It's not the same.
not the same. I want you to be comforted by the fact that it would be great, whatever it is. Okay. And then, how long can people last without water? Well, not long. And so, what you have here is devastating. I suppose if they had a case of Pepsi in the pantry, they could drink that. But the fresh water supply is now blood, as is the oceans. And remember, we've already read this, so we're not going to reread it. But the angel of the waters basically declares this is an appropriate judgment because this great desire on the part of the beast and his followers for blood, we're going to give them blood. When we get to the next chapters about Babylon, we'll find that the first half of the tribulation period, she the great harlot sheds the blood of God's people. The second half, it will be the Antichrist who sheds the blood of God's people. And so God is responding by saying, you know, they've been killing my people, and they really love blood, so we're going to give them blood. That's what we're going to do for them. And so that's the gist of it. And that's what the angel, as he evaluates what's going on, saying, well, this is appropriate. Yeah, I'm not upset because my domain is now all blood instead of water. Okay, bowl judgment number 4. Again, we aren't told how God is going to do this. The fourth angel poured out his bowl upon the sun, and it was given to it to scorch men with fire. And men were scorched with fierce heat. And they blasphemed the name of God who has the power over these plagues, and they did not repent so as to give him glory. So again, these people know where the source of this is coming from, that it's a judgment of God. We live in the desert Southwest, and we don't live in the hottest spot of the United States. That would be Death Valley. But, you know, it can get hot. This last year, we had 2 days back to back, a Saturday and a Sunday, one of the weekends, where the temp got up to 118 in the shade. That is very hot, let me tell you. And really, there's not much you can do. When you go outside, if you didn't have air conditioning, boy, that would be a tough place to hang out. Death Valley, I think the hottest, I think it got, if I recall correctly, one time Death Valley got up to 131. I mean, that's hot. Some people run a marathon in Death Valley. Not a marathon, but I don't know how many miles it is, race in the summertime in Death Valley. A bit nuts. But whatever the temp is, remember now, what do they tell you? They tell us all the time, keep hydrated, and you get that too. Keep hydrated, but how do you keep hydrated if there's no water? Well, I mean, this is going to be one sorry moment for the followers of the Antichrist. No water, incredible heat, you got running sores, a la Job, on you. Misery, misery. Number 5, supernatural darkness. And again, verse 10 says, upon the throne of the beast, in other words, in the center of his kingdom. And his kingdom became darkened, and they gnawed their tongues because of pain. I mean, so you have this incredible heat. You've got the running, painful sores a la Job. Pitch black. They did not repent of their deeds. The 6th angel poured out his bowl upon the great river Euphrates, which is probably blood now. Its content, water, was dried up. And whether or not it's refurbished at all in a moment of a day or two, I don't know. I mean, it's much like the Nile River. Remember in Moses' day? It was turned to blood, but obviously it didn't stay that way. So whatever the source of the underground springs or something, I don't know. But the point is that whatever's in the Nile, in the Euphrates River, is dried up. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, the mouth of the beast, out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. And they are spirits of demons performing signs, which go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them together for the war of the great day of God the Almighty. And again, boy, the sequence and the chronology is so very tight at this point. It's hard to say exactly what time frame is, but it's not much. We're not talking about a lot of time. And anyway, they are headed for the battle of God. And again, Zechariah 14, 12 to 14 actually, Joel 3, Isaiah 63, all these passages come to bear. Verse 16, and they gathered them together to the place which in Hebrew is called Har Megiddo. And so that's, of course, where everybody knows Armageddon. They make movies about Armageddon. But the name stands for the idea of judgment. The Har Megiddo is a part of the winepress of God. And then, number 7, and don't know exactly why God chose this one to kind of finish it all off, but some of this is so Egypt, isn't it? I mean, it reminds you of stuff that happened in the days of Moses. And the 7th angel poured out his bowl upon the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne saying, "It is done." Flashes of lightning, thunder, great earthquake. Whoa, look at this one. Such as there has not been since man came to be upon the earth. That even beats the one of chapter 6, where everything is moved out of its, all islands, mountains moved out of their places. There has not been since man came to be upon the earth, so great an earthquake it was, and so mighty. And the great city was split up into 3 parts. The cities of the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. Every island fled away, not just moved, they disappear now. Mountains were not found. And huge hailstones, about 100 pounds each. I'm going to the store to be getting ice, going camping, block of ice, 10 pounds. These are 100-pound hailstones. Obviously not much is left. Came down from heaven and then blasphemed the name of God because of the plague of hail, because his plague was extremely severe. And God's judgments are now complete, but the thing that strikes you, or should, is the fact that after all of this, and men recognize that the judgments are from God, they're no longer saying, wow, what a weird set of circumstances this is. But they blaspheme God, and they will not repent. I'll be honest with you, I cannot imagine what these last days of Daniel's 70th week are like. It's hard to imagine because I don't have any experience in these things. But I would point out one thing that may be of interest to you. It's not really part of this course. But these earthquakes, which apparently level the planet in a way that has not been seen since after the flood when the mountain building took place. But apparently the mountains are leveled because we know that when Ezekiel starts talking about the millennial kingdom and the temple, he describes in Israel an area, a 50 square mile area, which will be devoted to the city of Jerusalem, which will be a 10-mile square city. And outside of the city, but within the 50-mile plateau, will be a 1-mile square temple of Messiah. And furthermore, the indication is from Ezekiel and elsewhere that this will be now the highest place upon earth. So apparently Mount Everest isn't going to make it. Mount McKinley, all the rest of them are now flattened out. And apparently it is part of the final judgments of God in the tribulation period, which is going to reshape the crust of the earth. And the place that we know about is Israel, where you have this 50 square mile plateau. So, with the coming of the final judgment, we of course will be having the second coming of Christ. And so now, the seventh trumpet has blown, the third woe has come. And we begin to understand why the angel way, way back there at the end of chapter 8 said, woe, 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 the worst is yet to come. And we could see, yeah, you know, that's really true. It really is the worst to come. So, we are now ready for the return of Jesus, but that doesn't happen until chapter 19. And so what we want to do after the break is take a brisk walk through chapters 17 and 18 so that tomorrow we can basically start mopping up this mess upon earth and see what Jesus is going to do then. And we deal with some significant theological issues when we get to chapter 20. Okay, let's take a 7-minute break. We'll start at 11:30. I'll be back in a moment. What?
Honestly, as soon as I'm change it. Yeah, no, because I have to change because I have to go help Chris to present for the congressional, and I can't work the journalist for that. Yeah, and I don't. This makes me feel weird.
At the moment, I've already reached many of them.
You serious?
Yeah.
Many of them for the bronze or for?
Yeah, the bronze. And I'm close to silver on a couple of them.
Nice.
And I'm close to gold on one.
Which one? Is it this?
I think, yeah, physical fitness. Because that one's 200. So I think I'm at 138 for physical fitness only. And then 89 for the volunteer service.
So,
It was
if you're close, in your personal development to 100 hours, public, when you submit the hours, submit them for gold and silver for those.
okay.
Because once you have the silver, you just won't have to resubmit it. Even though you don't have silver in everything, you'll have reached it in some things. Like when I submitted for the gold, I only had to submit one thing that I was waiting on.
Okay. Did you have like an amount of participation required for the
Oh.
silver and gold? Because
Yeah,
bronze
that's
is 7
true.
months, is this is what we'll be at. by the
Right.
time.
I forgot about the time cap. And so that would work. Nice.
And I'm curious, if I submit for the bronze, do those hours still count for the silver? Okay, cool.
Yep.
It's like, oh good.
Yeah,
I
you don't have to start all over. Yeah, no, that would be
That would,
amazing.
that would be crazy. Yeah. And then I'll see if Zach wants to do the trip up pass this week.
Nice.
Look at the temperatures and stuff, see what we're looking at. But for the bronze is just one overnight. You know, I thought you came in with one of the cookies that we planted in your guys' domain.
Oh,
I was like, oh, they're using them.
I'm not that brave.
They're not that great, honestly. I mean, for mana, they're not rock hard, but they're not great.
So C.S. Lewis in the last battle is kind of making more sense now.
Oh,
Because I'm pretty sure there's a huge earthquake
This to
in
this,
that
and this to that, and then yes, this, there you go. Yes, that's what it is. We don't have the cost.
Old Judgment 7 is insane. It's
All the time when we were
Yeah.
little, so that's still there.
and what are the survivors saying their last you know, which really is, when you think it, given any thought at all, really
Yeah?
is a snapshot of the human heart.
Oh, it's good.
Good does not dwell in.
Mariah.
Yeah.
It means better water.
I love the name of it, actually. It means better water.
Oh, are you feeling okay now? The headache? Well, bless her heart, and it's not hard to concentrate when you don't feel good. Now, well, the nice thing is we don't have afternoon session. That would be kind of difficult, wouldn't it?
And you get to play with these for your PCMA, so. That's like automatically like, I'll show you.
You're illuminating the world. Your flashlight's on.
Oh, okay. Yes. Nice one.
Right.
Today?
Oh, really? We're gonna talk about that.
Okay, saints, let's gather together for the final push of the day. 45 minutes of ecstatic study, delighting your souls, hearts, energizing you, or something's in it. All right. Okay, Ben has opted out, but that's okay. He'll be here eventually, I suppose. All right, now, we're going to try to explain a few things here. We can see, I hope, that there's a flow, a kind of a format to all of this. And it was pretty easy. All we had to do was sit and think for about 10 seconds. That when John is handed a scroll and told to prophesy again, and the time notations that were involved, that we were simply being told, look, there's additional information for you to know. It's not what these 7 peals of thunder say. There's more information out there, what we're not telling you, but here's what you need to know. And so once we got done and with the scroll, John gives us all of chapters 11, 12, 15, and 14. We can go back now into the flow again. It's kind of like we got out of our canoe on shore. Now we put the canoe back in the water and we're floating down towards the end. And of course, when we get to the final bowl judgment, we're told the wrath of God is done. So now we're expecting the kind of thing that's described in chapter 19 of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords returning and taking care of the beast and the false prophet and so on. So now we have chapters 17 and 18, which is a little bit different. And I think that what we have up on the screen is probably as close as we can get, because back in chapter 14, remember the angel flying through mid-heaven, number 2, said, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great." But there's no discussion. We don't know what he's talking about. And then we come to chapter 16 in connection with the final judgment. And we are told that Babylon falls. It's in verse 19, Babylon the Great. Now, please notice the terminology, because this comes back again. Babylon the Great was remembered before God. Okay, now, one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls and who would have been involved very personally and very directly with the destruction of Babylon, the fall of Babylon, now comes up to John and says, "Come here, I shall show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." Well, what great harlot? We haven't been told about any great harlot. But then as he goes through, it becomes clear that we are talking about Babylon. Verse 5 says it. Upon her forehead, and the name was written in mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. And so what we are looking at here is Dr. Robert Thomas is the guy who came up with the phrase an extended footnote. And I read that and I said, you know, that really probably does it. And so I've added the word content, an extended content footnote. You know, when you read, a lot of times footnotes are just telling you the source of something. But a content footnote, as you're writing a paper, you're writing a book, an article, you have something that's important, but you don't want to include it in the main text because it sort of bogs a person down as they're reading through. But if they'd like to check it out, they've got, you know, the content down here. I have a rather lengthy content footnote in my book, Understanding End Times Prophecy, when we get to the numbers, the concept, the idea of numbers in the book of Revelation. And that's content footnote is actually found in your class notes at the end about numbers in Revelation. But I didn't want to stick that in the chapter. I mean, you know, some people aren't that interested in it. And so if they're reading through this, they can see, oh yeah, there's a lot here that develops these statements. And so Revelation 17 and 18 seems to be of that variety. It's a content footnote explaining these passing statements of Babylon. Babylon. What about Babylon? So the angel comes to John and he says, one of those who had poured out the bowls, and he says, let me show you some things about Babylon. Let's develop Babylon just a little bit. Let me just read a few verses, and then we'll try to go over some stuff. So anyway, it's this great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality. And those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. So we are introduced with, if the kings are committing acts of immorality, it's and we understand that let me see if I have this. Yeah. That, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. But what you have here is a picture of an alliance between a powerful religious system and political leaders. What we have in America right now, and the emphasis of the secularism that's growing in our country, kind of being slowed down for the moment, but the idea that allegedly that there's to be the separation of church and state, that the secular and the religious are to be separate, is rather a unique idea. First of all, as you well know, it's not really what the Constitution says at all. But it's unique in human history because people don't think that way normally. In any nation, go back to Babylon, go back to Medo-Persia, and so on. If you wish, religion and the rest of life are very much mixed together. Religion is not set apart into one little pigeonhole over here, separate from the rest of life. It's all sort of integrated together. The gods and the goddesses are a part of everyday living. And you and I live that way too. We believe that as followers of Christ, we are to serve Him, live for Him, worship Him, communicate with Him 7 days a week. We don't isolate it to an hour or two on Sunday morning. And so we believe that all of life is integrated with the spiritual, the physical, and so on. So what you have here in chapter 17 and 18 is really quite normal, where the religious and the political, religious are really all blended together. Now, you know, and isn't this what Pastor Don does in his course, Two Kingdoms? Is this the text you use? Okay. So we don't need to spend time on this. But you know that going back into Genesis 10 or 11, you have something rather unique happening since the days of creation, and that is you have what is in essence an attempt to have an organized system of religion which actually leaves out the true God and substitutes Him for someone else. So the term Babylon, as a result, has not been a positive term that's used in scriptures, nor is it here. And so when Revelation 17 and 18 use the term, and chapters 14 and 16, it's one of those things like Sodom and Egypt that you automatically know this is not a good thing. We are talking about some sort of system, some sort of structured, organized religion or political system which is designed to leave God out. And so we know that, and it all, of course, started with the Tower of Babel. In Revelation, it's the same thing. There's no change with Babylon. It is still that godless system. But and the term great, which the scriptures don't throw around those adjectives. When it is said to be a great system, it is a dominant kind of system. And it is going to be not just a religious system, but as is often and usually the case, the political, the economic, the military even, are all combined as a part of it. And so, chapter 17, verse 5 mentions Babylon, Babylon the Great, in 18:2, he cried out with a mighty voice, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become the dwelling place of demons," so on. So, subject, Babylon. Going to explain to you a little bit in this content footnote, a little bit about what we meant when we said fallen is Babylon in chapter 14, and when it says that Babylon fell in the final judgment of God's wrath, exactly who that is, and we'll have to discuss where it is as well. So you've had good background in this, so that this is not something strange or new to you at all. But this is the new form of it, the final form in the last days of mankind. So I'm going to suggest that the emphasis of the two chapters differs. That chapter 17 emphasizes what we might call religious Babylon, but we're not saying that there is no political or economic emphasis here at all, because that isn't the case. Both are present in both chapters. But 17, I believe, emphasizes the religious, while 18 emphasizes the political and economic. And one of the questions that Bible students struggle with, debate, think about, build a case for is, are we talking about Babylon on the Tigris-Euphrates River in the present the country of Iraq? That was hotly promoted by a number of good men in the days of Saddam Hussein, with the rise of Babylon, and Babylon becoming, having at one time, I think, the fourth largest army in the world, and with oil, the economic prosperity of Iraq. Not so much lately, though. But if it's not Babylon by the Euphrates River, where all of this is centered, where is it anyhow? So we'll try to take a look at that. Now, what I tried to do in the notes by putting all of this stuff down are to take all of the details and try to just make a list of them and give a brief word of explanation. She is the great harlot who sits upon many waters. Again, if you didn't catch it several class periods ago when we talked about this, the term harlot, like everything else in the book of Revelation, goes back into the Old Testament. And so when chapter 17 talks about a harlot, he's not, the angel here is not talking about what we view as prostitutes in, our country or other countries. Prostitutes have no purpose except for physical sexual activity. Their philosophy of life, their religion, if they have one, is not an issue. That's not what, but that's not true here. A harlot, the harlot system coming out of the book of Hosea, Jeremiah, and other prophets, is a picture of people who claim a loyalty to the true God, but in fact are disloyal by going after other gods. And so it's really a kind of religious prostitution. So I've given you some scriptures. There's a lot more. The whole book of Hosea focuses on this concept. So the harlot The word is the common Greek word porneia. It's a noun, though, referring to one who is a fornicator. And it is looking, based upon the Old Testament, of that which is a spiritual fornication. This suggests that she claims loyalty to the true God, but has prostituted herself with other gods. And so she is going to be alive and well in the first half of the tribulation period. She is called the Great Harlot, and that is validated by her description in the verses that follow. Verse 4, she's clothed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations. In verse 3, I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. What animal is that? Well, that's already been identified in chapter 13, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. There's that same imagery again. We're talking about the Antichrist, and we are presented, by the way, with a rather interesting thing all of a sudden, that she is riding the beast. Now, if you're riding a horse, you and the horse have common, the horse may not know it, but you have a common destination, the two of you together. But the rider, in most cases, except when I'm riding a horse, the rider controls the horse. Whenever I go horseback riding, the horses seem to sense that I have no authority over them whatsoever, and they have a tendency to do their own thing. So, but normally. And so this raises a most interesting thing, because as we'll see, this is in the first half of Daniel's 70th week that the great harlot comes to a position of power and prominence. And could it be, just could it be, possibly be, that as he defeats 3 nations and 7 others fall into line, that he is getting help, aid from a religious system that helps put all of this new empire together? Intriguing, but she is seen riding the beast. She is wealthy, it's a wealthy religious system, and politically very powerful. Now, she sits on many waters. Doesn't necessarily mean that she is a worldwide religion, because she probably isn't. The waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Now, the fact that she rides on the beast, and that we are now going to be reintroduced to the 10 horns again, would suggest that her dominance and wealth as a religious system is Western. In other words, she's not a worldwide system. In other words, maybe Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever, are not a part of this at all. But it seems to be Western. There's a close connection. You got to admit it, a close connection between her and the beast, which is Western in the first half. 11 nations. That we know. So, so she's a harlot sitting upon many waters. The scarlet beast, in case you, with the 7 heads and 10 horns, goes back to chapter 13, verse 1. So, it's a scarlet beast. Well, let's take a look at that. Oh, I guess I have that order. Her clothing all points to great wealth. The gold, the jewels, all say that we are not only dealing with a idolatrous system that claims loyalty to God, but it's a very, very wealthy system that's involved here. Great wealth, the clothing, the scarlet, is an indication of that. Her name is said to be a mystery. A mystery, the term mysterion that's used in the New Testament is a concept of something that, like when Paul says that the church was a mystery until it was revealed to the apostles. It's a truth that up to this point was not known and not understood, and it took divine revelation. And so her name is a mystery, something that was unknown in the past. And perhaps a clue to that is, if you notice verse 5, it says, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and it's plural. And what this seems to suggest is something brand new, something not seen before. And that is, into one religious system flows a number of really false religions that claim a loyalty to God. Let me give you a possibility, or at least an example of what could be possible. If this is in fact Roman Catholicism, which has been identified since the days of the Reformers, it's not just that. Could it be then that anything that would be under the umbrella of Christian, whether it be Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, apostate Protestantism, they're all combined into one grand, wealthy, powerful religious system, claiming to be followers of the true God, but in fact they are not. That would possibly make sense because, you know, you've probably heard of the World Council of Churches and all of that, which for decades and decades have been attempting to bring under one umbrella everything that is Christian. They've not had great success so far, but hey, you take true believers out of the world. You got a real possibility of the coming together of what is really Western religions, for the most part, under the umbrella of the mother of harlots. And this is something new. It's a mystery. It hasn't been seen or labeled before. So what it will be, it could well be that, but it's going to be unique. It's not something that we observe as it is today. But I think the plurality is interesting, the mother of harlots. She is sitting on a scarlet beast, having 7 heads and 10 horns. It's tough to say what the nuances of meaning are. Scarlet is used for sin. It's also used for royalty. And I guess both would apply here. She's very wealthy and also very sinful. Okay, now, we eventually have to deal with this, so we'll do it here. Okay, let's look, once you see the text itself, look at verse 6. John says, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. Now, when it says she's drunk with the blood of Jesus, of the witnesses of Jesus, you know, she is responsible for the killing of God's people, of true believers. But not just a couple here and there. The idea of being drunk with their blood indicates an abundance of blood being shed. Now, when the little horn overcomes the saints of God, how long does he overcome the saints? What's the period of time?
Was it not 3.5?
What's that?
3.5 years.
Yeah. You knew that. You're just so late, you're hungry. I sympathize with your inability to speak at this point. 3.5 years. That's the second half. We are now learning what happens in the first half. And that is that it is the great harlot who is going to be responsible for the murdering of God's people. So she's drunk with the blood of the saints of Jesus. And John just, I mean, he's sort of amazed. She's quite an imposing figure. The angel said, why do you wonder? I shall tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and to go to destruction. Well, thank you very much. That clarifies things, doesn't it? And those who dwell on the earth will wonder, whose name has not been written in the book of life. Wonder is a sounding of, like, awesome, dude. You know, that type of attitude. Just standing in awe. But the people who do that, of course, don't understand what they're really observing because they aren't believers. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And there's a second meaning for the 7 heads. And they are 7 kings / kingdoms. 5 have fallen. 1 is. The other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. And the beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th, and is one of the 7. And he goes to destruction. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, who have not yet received the kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. Those have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. And they're going to fight against the Lamb and lose, verse 14. Verse 15, we've already read this back when we were in Daniel 9, or Daniel 7. And he said, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will hate the harlot. Oh, so they don't have a symbiotic relationship here. They're not buds. No, they hate the harlot. Why, we aren't told, but probably she's using her spurs on as she's riding the beast or something. Something about, they don't like her. And they will make her desolate and naked, will eat her flesh, burn her up with fire. Sort of like complete destruction of the little girl. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God should be fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, let me point out chapter 19 and verse 2. Great rejoicing in heaven, because his judgments are true and righteous, for he has judged the great harlot, who was corrupting the earth with her immorality, and he has avenged the blood of his bondservants on her. And the second time they said, Hallelujah, her smoke rises up forever and ever. So one of the causes of great rejoicing in heaven is at the midpoint, when the great harlot is in fact destroyed, and the Antichrist and his 10 horns are the agents that God uses. Okay, now, we know the 10 horns. We don't need to go over that. That started back in Daniel 7. We actually spent a little time walking through Revelation 17. And 13, chapters 12 and 13 also mention the 10 horns. But the 7 heads, what is that about? Well, that now has been explained to us. Well, just exactly what was explained. Whoops. Time out. I thought I'd gotten rid of that. I actually had several slides and I got rid of them last night. Okay. Now we know. The 7 heads. Well, first of all, the text says there's actually 2 meanings to this.
Okay, real quick, going back, you said that she was destroyed at the midpoint.
Yeah.
How was she then, like, responsible for the bloodshed of the 2 witnesses?
I didn't say that.
Oh.
Of the witnesses of Jesus, not the 2 witnesses,
Oh.
just of the followers of Christ.
Okay,
Okay,
never mind.
sorry. Good.
Yeah.
Good, raising that clarifies it. So, okay. So, the 7 heads are the 7 mountains. Now, at the end, it will be said that the woman whom you saw is the great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth. So, that will be helpful in our identification of the location of this system. Now, okay, represents 7 kings and their kingdoms, and 7 mountains. So, let's take a look at this. Okay, the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And it is common, and I think probably there's some validity to it, that Rome, in fact, is noted for the 7 hills of Rome. This is the city that was the most powerful city in John's day, and John's statement is that the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. And that's present tense in John's day. It's sort of a parenthetical statement, and so that is going to point to the location of the great harlot as being Rome. But let's look at some other things here. 7 kings, or, you know, their empires. And they are 7 kings. Remember, 7 kings, kingdoms? 5 have fallen. 1 is, the other has not yet come. So, 5 have fallen. All right. one is. So what would number 6 be? What kingdom was existing as John's writing this? Rome. This is 95 AD. That would be Rome. And then he goes on to say that one has not yet come. So, what about the first 5? Well, we know what 3 of them are from Daniel. Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. But Daniel began in 605 and was looking forward. But what would have been the 2 other empires that ruled basically over Israel, that dominated the world? Egypt and Assyria would be the other 2. Egypt being the more ancient one, but most of the Old Testament in the monarchy period was Assyria dominated the ancient Near East for centuries. So the 5 have fallen, these kings, these kingdoms. One is, and one is yet to come. Okay, we got it. So what would number 7 be from our understanding of Daniel? That's right, Rome 2. But he says, the beast which you saw and is not is himself also an 8th and is one of the 7, which sounds like double talk, but what we are learning is this. He's one of the 7, but there's an 8th. What does that mean? Well, I would suggest to you that what he's talking about is that in Rome phase 2, one thing that has never been revealed before is the fact that this guy, Antichrist, the beast, has 2 very distinct phases to his rulership. First half, over the 11 nations. Second half, over the entire world. He is not a world beater for the whole time. It's just in the second half. He was and he is not, and he's now come back. He is part of the 7, but he's an 8th. Abby.
When you said that, when describing the great harlot, they use the word harlot because they claim to follow the true God and they chase after other idols. Did those kingdoms claim to ever worship the true God? Or is it just the fact that they...
Which kingdoms?
Egypt, Assyria, Babylon?
No.
I'm confused. How is...
But the harlot is only related to Empire 7, the last one.
Okay.
The beast is sitting upon the harlot, which sequentially, time-wise, puts us into the time when the beast, the Antichrist, is alive.
So those other kingdoms and the 7 heads don't describe the harlot. Okay.
But these are empires which, of course, have been under Satan's control since he's the god of this world. 5 of them have disappeared. One is yet to come. And this is a suggestion as to what is being talked about here. Okay, now, what we have learned is that, and we know that the destruction, when they eat of her flesh and burn her up and all that, is at the midpoint, because that's where the worship of Satan and the Antichrist take place. All world religions come to an end. And in heaven, prior to the second coming, prior to the end of the tribulation, they're rejoicing over the fact that the great harlot has been destroyed. So, I hope this makes a little sense. It's a very difficult section. but I think this is likely what's being talked about here. Can I move on, or can you have anything you want to write down, or anything you want to ask, or? Okay, so, oops. Sorry about that. I'm trying to. That slide is out of place. Okay. In wrapping up chapter 17, things we have already said. God will use, which is what the text tells us, God uses the Antichrist and the 10 kings to destroy the harlot, and that they do. Heaven is quite excited about it, and there's great rejoicing. The place that it fits is at the midpoint. Her existence beyond the midpoint is not a possibility, because there is only one religion in the last half, and that starts with the abomination of desolation. It is the worship of Satan and the Antichrist. So when we look at chapter 17 and verse 18, who is the great harlot? Well, John says the woman that you saw is the great city which presently, right now, rules over the kings of the earth. And that would point to Jerusalem. So that would be my suggestion about her location. So religious Babylon would be a religious system centered in Rome, which would most likely include Roman Catholicism plus many aberrant forms of Christianity, whether it be Mormonism or whether it be the apostate Protestantism, whatever it might be, but it will be a unique thing that has never happened before in the entire 2,000-year history of the church, and that is that you have all of these coming together apparently into one religious system. So, just a couple of other things. Chapter 18. This Babylon, which we are suggesting is an economic political system, which of course is highly involved with religion. You don't separate the two. But first of all, notice how she comes to an end. Chapter 18, verse 2. He cried out with a mighty voice, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great." She has become a dwelling place of uncleanness, of demons, and so on. And again, you have the imagery of the wine of the passion of her immorality. The kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. So, the merchants are now brought in as very much a part of chapter 18, and they'll be talked about again and again. In verse 8, "For this reason in one day her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine. She will be burned up with fire, for the Lord God who judges her is strong. Now when it says in one day, it probably is not meaning a 24-hour day, but it means in a very, very short period of time. And I would suggest to you that we're looking here at the bowl judgments, which have come suddenly and powerfully upon this system. You notice also a couple of other verses, verse 10. The merchants, when they see this going up in smoke, standing at a distance because of the fear of her torment, saying, Woe, woe, the great city Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And again, the emphasis upon the suddenness of her destruction. Verse 17, for in 1 hour such great wealth has been laid waste. And so this, those who have aligned themselves with the 666 and the economics are finding things going up in smoke. Verse 19, and they threw dust on their heads. I'm looking for something here. Excuse me, but okay, it's I can't find the verse, but it says about they are remembered before God. Have you read? Which is basically echoing chapter 16 statement, which suggests to us that the 1 hour of judgment, or the 1 day, the suddenness of the judgment, is in fact the bowl judgments, and I can't find it. Maybe I have it further here. Oh, hello. Yeah. Maybe I ought to look at my PowerPoint. For her sins have piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. That is the phrase out of chapter 16. And is connected with the suddenness of her destruction and the quickness of it, which is in fact lining up with the bowl judgments. So, where is this Babylon located? Is it also Rome? Well, again, it's hard to be absolutely positive, but I'd like to give you a suggestion that it is probably Jerusalem. It's a place of unusual demonic activity, and of course we know from the two witnesses that Jerusalem, Sodom and Egypt is a hotbed of Antichrist activity, the center of the worship of Satan and the Antichrist. Demonic activity will be great because that's where the image of the beast is located, there in the Jerusalem temple. But it's also a place that where God's people and prophets have been. Come out of her, my people, that you may not participate in her sins, and that you may not receive of her plagues. And the last verse is a verse that echoes sort of an allusion back to a number of places, whether it's 2 Chronicles or some of the prophets. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on the earth. So, while it's not definitive, there does seem to be a focus on Jerusalem. This is not the great harlot. This is now something new and different. The great harlot is not the center, but the Antichrist is, and his worship. This is Babylon, the Tower of Babel on steroids now. This is the ultimate climax of Babylon. And so we saw in Daniel 11, where is the focus of activity? It's in the Middle East. Where is the royal pavilion of the Antichrist set up? It's set up in Jerusalem, between the seas. Where does Paul say he takes his seat in the temple? It's Jerusalem. Activity funnels and focuses into Jerusalem as the center of his empire. So, what I am suggesting is simply this. Revelation 17 is developing the concept of Babylon with an emphasis upon religion. And the religion will be unique and different in that it's a mystery, not seen before, not in this form it hasn't. She's a mother of harlots. She is the city, the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. And even I think the 7 hills that are referenced there, the 7 heads are the 7 hills, 2 different meanings to the 7 heads. Revelation 18 is looking at the political, economic Babylon, and again, in the second half of the tribulation, Jerusalem is the center. I have some folks that I have a lot of respect for, who insist that it is Babylon on the Euphrates River. And their case seemed a lot stronger years ago when Babylon was ruled by Saddam Hussein and the city was wealthy. The city is not that anymore. Iraq is a shadow of its former self. And it is very hard to imagine that it is Babylon on the Euphrates River that's being talked about, especially if we believe in the idea of an any moment coming of Christ. That that you could see in Babylon in Iraq what's being described here. So look, we can't be dogmatic, but there are sign pointers which I suggest. And this is the position I've landed on, which I think is right, but then we can't be absolutely positive that we are talking about these anti-God systems centered in Rome and Jerusalem, respectively. And what chapters 17 and 18 really are an extended content footnote telling us about this term Babylon. So that's sort of a footnote. Now we move on, which we will do tomorrow. And I wanted to kind of move along here because I'd like to try to finish Revelation, or at least get almost all of it done by tomorrow, so that on Friday you don't have anything else to do but to take the exam, and all of the information for studying will be yours. So hopefully that's what we'll do tomorrow. But we got at least a good shot at it now that we've come this far. So we'll look at the kingdom of Christ, the issues of amillennialism, premillennialism, and the eternal kingdom of God, which we don't know a whole lot about, so except for this portion. So, okay, have a good afternoon. We've done what needs to be done. We're moving along here.
Are you okay here? Are you okay?
If the first, chapter 17 is talking about,
No, that would like,
Religious.
that would point you to,
religious one,
I
that's
guess,
the
like
beginning.
manipulation.
Well, it would
They
appear
don't
to
give
be,
you a
yes.
number, I don't know what to do.
Well, I wasn't talking about that one as
I
if
have
it was
an
drinking
interview in
clothes.
an hour, but like my interview
Because
reminder
in the first half
emails
of
have
the
been telling me
tribulation,
that I'm supposed to
we are
call.
saying that
I mean, you can.
the,
But they don't give me a number.
he was
Do they, do you
ones
have a
who
number for the
persecute
police? And they can
God's
like